Hello, IDC friends and supporters. Thank you so much for joining us today. With me, I have Ms. Nadine Maenza from the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. She is the vice chair. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Ms. Nadine has done some great work with her time at the Commission, and we're going to focus on a couple things today. Ms. Nadine, I know that yesterday the Commission put out a fact sheet on the coronavirus and with specific issues that they wanted to raise. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We thought this was a good opportunity to just talk about the fact that, religious freedom is a right that everyone has, and it's not derogated in times of public emergency or even war. So you still have the right to freedom of religion or belief, regardless of what country you live in or what's going on around you. Obviously in the United States, we use the Constitution to really claim that right. But around the world, it's more the Declaration of Human Rights, the International Declaration of Human Rights, and also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So those two documents are really used to claim those rights. And the fact of the matter is they can be limited in times of emergency, which is what we're seeing now by canceling of church services, of mosques, of different gatherings that do affect religious communities.
Yeah. So I know, for example, right now in the northeast of Iraq, that they are in complete quarantine, and a lot of people are just staying at home because of it. So your concern as the Commission is that the human rights are not violated in the name of religion during these, I guess, turbulent times while we're all making efforts to stay at home.
Right, exactly. Like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of, the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. But there can be limited, and that would be in times of health, like now. But it really should be a specific, tailored to a specific threat and non-discriminatory. So, what the Commission wants to just see that it's uniformly applied, so that either specific religious groups aren't being targeted, or even religious groups in general aren't being targeted. And so most around the world, we're seeing really a clampdown on all gatherings. But it's affected. I know in Kuwait, instead of the call to prayer, they have the pray in your home call. Obviously we've seen they've closed Mecca, Medina. The Vatican is doing online events. So, it's kind of been a lockdown on really religion around the world.
Yeah.
We have seen, of course, there are greater risk of those communities that are already having their rights being suppressed. Obviously in China, Uyghurs, of course, are being targeted again. They're in these concentration camps that are particularly vulnerable. We do know that they've been forced labor to make up for sick coronavirus employees. And also we know that they've been doing lung transplants. And with their history of organ harvesting, we're afraid that they're also using prisoners of conscience for that as well.
Yeah, so those are definitely concerns to look at. I will with the video, I'll put the link to the fact sheet because I know others will be very intrigued by what you guys are saying.
Appreciate
but
it.
outside of China, has the Commission heard of any instances where people were being persecuted right now in terms of their religion with the coronavirus, or do you think it's mostly focused in East Asia?
Well, at this point in time, we have seen the communities that are already marginalized or especially at risk. Like even though South Korea has been used as a success in the way they've managed the coronavirus, there was an instance where 2/3 of the cases were traceable back to one person who went to the Shincheonji Church, which is a marginalized, very quiet. People keep their membership secret, and so they had to come public with their membership list. And really, they've been scapegoated. There was over 1 million citizens that signed a petition to ban this religion, and they really didn't do anything wrong. It could have been any religious group, but because they were already marginalized, it was easy to point to them. So we're just trying to call those kind of examples out. One of the one point we did want to make, which is, limitations on religion, freedom of religion or belief is lawful because of the health consequences right now. But clearly our fear is that some of them may stick around after the pandemic is over.
Yeah.
And this can't be used at that point in time to marginalize or persecute religious communities. So, when it's the lift comes up where people are able to gather again, we would want to see religious communities be treated the same as secular communities and no specific religious communities to be targeted.
Yes, definitely. Those are definitely. You just took a trip to Northeast Syria. Did you want to speak a little bit about that? I know you went to other trips too. If you want to just comment on your what you saw.
Sure. I've been able to do several trips this year. I was recently in Azerbaijan and was able to meet with government officials there and advocate for religious communities there. And I also, in my own personal capacity, was able to visit Northeast Syria, and that was a really special visit. You know, each of us as commissioners are able to do trips on our own capacity in addition to the official trips we do with the commission. But at the commission is where I first learned about really the project of the Autonomous Administration of Northeast Syria. Yeah. And the work they have done there to build a community that really respects one another's rights and really practice religious freedom. You know, we have said that it's really unmatched, their religious freedom conditions in this part of Northeast Syria. And, you know, with the rest of the country being, you know, war and so much news coming out that is negative, it's often easy for people to overlook this project that's going on there. But so I first heard about it maybe a couple of years ago and have been trying to come. So it was really special for me to be able to visit. And then Ralph Abraham was also recently able to go. We just had an article in The Hill that talked about why Northeast Syria matters. And, you know, we really talk about a couple of things. First of all, the religious freedom is working and the government is working. The government has legitimacy. You can't make, I mean, there's governments that have sovereignty and they don't have legitimacy, but you can't really make people respect one another or believe in these rights. And this exists in this part of Syria. You know, I talk about like Afghanistan, you know, we're pulling out of Afghanistan really having not changed the culture there at all, because we really, you can't beat this Islamic extremism with just bombs and money. You have to win the war of ideas. And what they're doing there is they're doing that by showing what freedom looks like. And it's really like the West Berlin to the East Berlin is having that contrast of freedom next to extremism, and people are going to choose the freedom. So it's really, to me, an important weapon for us in this fight against this extremist ideology to be able to support or a government that is really fighting for freedom. So it was really a special trip for me to be able to see, and I was glad that the congressman was able to go. And you know, we've had a lot of opportunities to talk about the potential for lifting sanctions off them, for helping to strengthen them so they could do business and be able to just function as a free society.
That's very cool. Yeah, we've spoken to several leaders. I've interviewed them, several different leaders in the region, and they've pretty much said the same thing. And one of IDC's biggest policy recommendations and policy initiatives is for an autonomous government in that region, not only in Syria, but in Iraq and other parts of the world that faces that issue. Because once they're able to protect their own homelands, they'll be able to have government and have different aspects of society that is important for their well-being. So definitely sounds like
No, I totally agree with you. And I wanted to throw out that, Open Doors had mentioned that, one of the trends they saw this year was a disappearance of Christianity in Iraq and Syria. And we really do believe, not as commission, but personally, and some of the work that I have done, is that, the Autonomous Administration of Northeast Syria and then a Nineveh province, if we institute that in Iraq, that really having these self-governance where Christians have a big voice in the government, where they can be preserved, that really will be the answer to saving Christianity in these two spaces.
Yeah, definitely. And then if you wanted to take that argument, you could also reflect on the case in Lebanon, where Christians are a big part of the government, and their voice is still being heard because they have that. So definitely, while their numbers are dwindling, that's a different story. But
nevertheless, they're able to survive there and live there, and that.
I know that your report is coming out May 1st. Did you want to comment on any specific things with I know that it's not finished, but did you want to comment on anything in regards to the report?
So we as commissioners, it's really been a busy time for us where we're going through each report and, approving the language, writing the chapters. And so what we'll do is we'll make recommendations to the U.S. government for countries that we believe should be countries of particular concern. And then we will also make recommendations for countries that will be on the watch list. And so we've called them our tier 1 and our tier 2 countries, but that's kind of how they will work in terms of the recommendations we make to our own government, which is for how these countries should be designated. So we're currently, as commissioners, really busy on the phone. We've been meeting now, obviously, more on the phone with all that's going on and talking through some of these reports. We do hope we may have some changes, countries that have moved or so we're still working through all that right now. So I promise it'll be a newsworthy report.
For
And
sure, it is every year.
and we really are, we exist to call out things the way they are. So, the thing that's so interesting about the U.S. Commission compared to the State Department, and why, our government leaders had such foresight and how they created us is, we have the ability to look at these countries laser focused just on religious freedom. We don't have to consider the bilateral relationship we have with other countries the way that the State Department does. So,
and that reflects on the policy recommendations that you're able to institute. So it's very clear headed, and it gives precise I guess recommendations that are able to reflect the needs of that specific region and country. So
yep. So we're really not down. So we're getting down to the very end, and really looking forward to. We're going to have our rollout at the end of April, and of course you'll, I'm sure, be there. And
yes,
we do appreciate you taking the information that the Commission has assembled and using that.
Thank you. So as you know, IDC's biggest mission right now is advocacy and education of the causes, and a lot of the reports that not only the Commission but the State Department does come out is very important for us to be able to do our policy recommendations. So we thank you for your work, and specifically for all that you're doing, and obviously the Commission, but specifically the work that you're doing in ensuring that the voice of many of these Christians is heard. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us about this.
Oh, well, I'm a big fan of In Defense of Christians, your advocacy. I want to make the case for all religious minorities. I've always been impressed with the work that you've done, and I think that, people that work on the ground understand when you're advocating for Christians, advocating for all minorities alongside them, help the Christians too. And you guys are really good on the ground by making sure that you're advocating for Christians and all the religious minorities in their communities, and it helps the Christians in addition to have that voice. So I appreciate all the work you guys do. One of my favorite organizations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. It was very nice talking.